Hello, hello. So today we are about to start a new chapter of this podcast. It will be more focused on the solo episodes where I'm just focused on one particular subject for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And most of these subjects will be related to the blog post that I've written. So you will have an audio version that you can listen to. But if you want to look up some notes, look up some examples after listening to the podcast, you will have a link to the blog post so you can easily do it without caring about taking some notes or anything that might distract you from listening. So just relax and listen to this episode. So today we're going to speak about distribution. How to get users for your crypto product without bullshit. So to prepare this blog post, I spoke with many founders and early stage team members from notable crypto projects. So before I start, thanks to Mark from Aave, Patricio from PoApp, Gregoire from Snapshot, Stefan from Gnosis, Zero X Maki, D from Uniswap, of course, D from Zora, Chris from L2Beat, Alexander and Evgeny from Zerion, Mike from Rainbow, Seb from Zapper, Dan from Farcaster, Angeli from Collabland, Elliot from Safari, Morris from FluidKey, and others that shared their stories, but I didn't manage to include them, or they just gave feedback to the early drafts of this article. As you can see, a lot of people got involved. So let's start. If you look at successful crypto projects, they don't grow in the same way. For example, Ethereum spread through Bitcoin community. Tether spread through BD deals with centralized exchanges, and Polymarket spread through Twitter. So, as the classic goes, finding the way to promote your product is 50% of building a startup. And there's this legendary Justin Kahn quote that first-time founders are obsessed with product and second-time founders are obsessed with distribution. So how do you do distribution in crypto? And what can you learn from successful projects like Aave, Polymarket, Lido, and many, many others? Let's start. The most important truth that you need to understand before we begin is that best product doesn't always win. And for engineers who like to rationally compare features, create benchmark tables, and so on, this looks unfair. Why would a worse product win? Why would someone even choose the worst product? But products don't compete in this rational vacuum. Most of the time, they compete in this complex web of people's habits, their social feed, their friends' pressure, concerns they have about different types of product, and limited time to make a decision which product to choose. So sometimes people use Google Docs for their personal note-taking because they never heard about Obsidian. Sometimes they use Microsoft Teams instead of Slack because their corporations told them that they have to. And sometimes, you want to drink something refreshing and it's more convenient to pick up Coca-Cola instead of looking for some alternative drink on the shelf. All these products didn't win because they were better at what they do for the users. They won because they had a better go-to-market, which means they were better than competitors at reaching their target users and convincing them to try their products. And it also happens in crypto. That's one of the reasons why people keep using MetaMask since 2017, because it's such a big decision to try a new wallet that people are just sticking with the thing they tried years ago. It never broke down. it's kind of okay, and they keep using the wallet. They don't even spend time to look for alternatives because it's not top of their priority list. This is also why we have airdrops. I mean, one of the reasons why, of course, but like what airdrops do is they convince people to try new products, even though naturally they wouldn't be that inclined to try new stuff. Because they're like, well, maybe if I try this new DeFi app, I will get some tokens in return. So we use airdrops to override our natural reluctance to try new things. And because of that, if your marketing strategy is just giving away t-shirts at a conference and tweeting GM, it might not actually work in 2025. You know, in Silicon Valley, it's kind of obvious that you need to have a good product and good distribution to win. And in crypto, Uniswap is a great example of that because it's often remembered as a technical breakthrough, but it was also a great go-to-market execution. A year-long Uniswap campaign. You might think that Uniswap became a multi-billion-dollar decentralized exchange because it was the first one that actually worked really well. But when you look closely, you notice that Hayden started the marketing campaign a year before he launched the product. How come? Well, Hayden built the first POC in late 2017, inspired by the famous Vitalik post about AMMs on our Ethereum. This POC was presented at DevCon 3 by Carl Florsch, giving Uniswap some initial attention. And then Hayden, like a real BD guy, spoke about Uniswap and NYC Mesh, discussed the concept with Vitalik, who of course was interested because it was a response to his post on Reddit. Hayden did 3 days of demoing Uniswap at AdCon 2018, promoted it at NYC Blockchain Week, let the whole EF know about Uniswap existence by applying for and winning a grant. He also spent weeks working on Uniswap at Balance and MakerDAO offices, where he spoke with many crypto natives. He went to IFE's conference in Hong Kong and Shanghai Blockchain Week, and he also reached out to anyone who expressed interest in providing liquidity. So a big part of Uniswap promotion was these one-to-one interactions with the founder at conferences, crypto companies' offices, and DMs, of course. And this channel, this way of promoting Uniswap, was perfectly tied to the revolutionary nature of this product. Because when Hayden spoke with people and they didn't get something, they could ask a follow-up question and he could elaborate and say, oh yeah, this is how it worked. This is why, AMMs could actually make it happen. And we did this POC and so on and so forth. So when Hayden launched Uniswap at DevCon 4 in Prague, the product was already well known in the space. And the space was way smaller than it is today, of course. So as you can see, the history of Uniswap isn't the history of a dev building in stealth who launches his app and becomes an overnight success. Aside from the product innovation, there's been a lot of promotional work done before the product even launched. And I would be personally surprised if Hayden thought about his actions as a go-to-market campaign. I imagine he was just talking about the product he was working on and he found it interesting and he wanted to get some input from people around him. But Hayden was aware that he needs to think about marketing. Here's a quote from his blog post about the history of Uniswap. Up to this point, I considered my role in Uniswap to be mostly a technical one. When someone asked how it worked, I often started by telling them the mathematical formula behind it. Many people walked away confused. Richard Barton helped me understand that people not understanding Uniswap was a me problem, not a them problem. Developers were just a small part of the bigger picture. If I wanted people to use my project, I needed to talk about it on their terms, in ways they understood. Uniswap's biggest outstanding challenge was a social one. Okay, so if even Uniswap, that launched years ago in 2018 when the community was way more cozy, needed some promotional campaign and thinking a lot about marketing, then probably your product launch in 2025 or 2026 needs something about marketing too. So how exactly do you do this go-to-market? Do you just talk with random people at conferences about your product? Well, it's a bit more complicated. So a thing to understand here is that channels don't work in isolation. And here's what it means. I sometimes speak with founders about marketing and, we speak for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and they ask me, okay, so should we do Twitter or KOLs or maybe just go to conferences? And it's very hard to say which channel is best for your product unless you set up the fundamentals right. Go-to-market is not about going all in into the first marketing channel you thought about. It only works when three things line up. First, the right market. Second, the right segment of that market. And third, the right channel for that segment of that market. If you have the wrong market and a wrong segment, even the best channel might not work. So here's an example. Imagine Hayden built Uniswap the way he built it, but instead of speaking with Ethereum OGs and developers, he was like, I know who needs my product. These are consultants who run enterprise blockchains in Europe. And he would spend all his efforts trying to sell his product to these people. Do you think that Uniswap would take off so much? Well, probably not. Even though it's like the same product, he wouldn't change a thing. And he used the same channel, this one-on-one conversations, but because he would have chosen the wrong market and the wrong segment of the market, it would be way harder to grow the product. So you need to set up fundamentals before you set up funnels. So how to do go-to-market the right way? So the first step is deciding which market are you after. Startups are all about finding product market fit. Yet most founders spend 99% of their time thinking about the product and about 1% of their time thinking about the market. So the way it typically works, founder has some product idea, maybe a prototype. They speak to a few people and they're like, oh, okay, this is going to be our market. We need to promote it to these people. But it's like marrying the first girl you liked. It might work if you're lucky or have a great intuition. Maybe you will live happily ever after. But most of the time, it's not a good way to make such a decision. So what else could you do? Well, closely evaluate options and double down on the best fit for your product. So look at Coinbase. They started by being exclusively focused on the Bitcoin market. And if Coinbase supported Litecoin, Namecoin, or Dogecoin instead, they would never become as big as they are today. They picked the right market and focused on it a lot. I mean, they were solely focused on Bitcoin for the first 4 years until they added Ethereum in 2016. And if you look at the blog post version of this GTM guide, you can see 2013 Coinbase website screenshot. And Blur is a similar story. They focused on pro NFT traders who generated over 90% of OpenSea volume at the time, and they put all efforts to onboard them to Blur. And it paid off. They reached escape velocity. But if they focused on average Joes, like people like me who, I don't know, maybe buy NFT once in a few months, and people who stop trading after 2022, it wouldn't work. So they picked the right market and it paid off. But if they proposed the same product to a different market, it wouldn't work. And another good example is Rainbow. They focus on Ethereum users who are looking for a mobile wallet that's useful, but it doesn't look like a boring banking app. Rainbow was fun, colorful. NFTs were first-class citizens there. And because other Ethereum mobile wallets weren't working that well, they managed to capture a significant part of that market. So a good framework for choosing your market is answering three questions. Where is the pain? Where is the money? And where are the battles? Choosing the right market. So the rule number one is no pain, no gain. If users' problems aren't painful enough, they won't care enough to look for the solution. Let's get back to Coinbase. When they launched in 2012, storing Bitcoin was hard. Trezor and Ledger were not around yet, and many people stored their coins on hard drives. That's why you can hear about people who lost their laptop and they found out that they had like $100 million of Bitcoin there, and now they are, looking for it on some, in a trash or wherever. But that's why the first version of Coinbase was a Bitcoin wallet. Then they figured out that buying Bitcoin was hard too, so they let people buy and store their Bitcoins. And later they also added some more elaborate trading. These are all hard problems to solve, and that's exactly why this market was attractive. The rule number two is that money talks. So if people feel the pain, but they can't pay for the solution, it's not a good market. Because, they need to pay you money for the product so you can build a sustainable business and generate revenue. If they don't have enough money, it just won't work. But if they have a lot of money, you don't even need that many users to have a successful product. Here's a good example from my other blog post about building consumer crypto. Last month on Ethereum, Aave charged over $60 million in fees with about 25,000 monthly users. That's over $2,400 in fees per user per month. And that's because some whales borrow and lend millions of dollars. Of course, not all fees go to Aave treasury, but it's still a wild number. So if you can generate a lot of revenue per user, you don't need that many users. That's why it's called money talks. This rule is called money talks, not user number talks. And the rule number three is choosing your battles. Some markets have a huge need, people ready to pay, but there are many obstacles on the way. So the best markets are the ones with some challenges, so others don't enter easily, but you know how to overcome them. So, like Polymarket, they decided to go through the SEC regulatory hell. ZK Sync's battle was R&D that they spent many years on before they got the tech right. For Sorare, they faced the complexity of closing deals with Real Madrid and FC Barcelona. And although all these battles were super hard, knowing what you're signing up for help you decide If this is the type of battle that you and your team is ready and qualified for, so you have some shot at, making it happen. So in other words, you want to be like 16th century Portugal. Thanks to Vasco da Gama, Portugal set up a highly profitable spice trade with Asia. And it was a painful problem that people paid to solve. And they kept the monopoly for decades because only they knew the sea road to Asia, which was this big obstacle they knew how to overcome. If you have a look at the blog post version, you can see this 1502 map known as Cantina Plandisphere, which was a Portuguese state secret because it has shown the world as Portuguese thought it looks like. And there's a quick story how even stealing this map didn't let Italians reproduce the Portuguese advantage in reaching Asia. So let's get to step number 2. Who exactly are you after? So once you picked your market, you need to double down your focus. Imagine your market is this like a big watermelon. If I said, well, hey, this is watermelon, do you want to eat it? You wouldn't just like pull a whole watermelon in your mouth, right? I would hope that you would just slice it and then, have a slice or two. And these slices in marketing speaks are called segments. And when picked right, they can amplify all work that you do for growth, distribution, GTM, marketing, however you call it. There are many ways to segment your market. If you picked a 90s marketing book, they will tell you that if you want to segment your market, you would use demographics, geography, and some basic psychography. So you would target adventurous boomers living in New York who like being outdoors. And this is a good way to segment your customers when you go for mass market. You have a 139-year-old brand. You have distribution in 200 countries and $5 billion annual budget, like Coca-Cola does. But this is a terrible way to segment your users when you are an unknown startup with $5,000 for marketing. It's like trying to copy the US Army strategy when you're just a pack of rebels with AK-47s hiding in the jungle. You cannot just send F-16s and B-2s to dominate the battleground. You need to be way, way more scrappy and precise. You need a beachhead market. How Satoshi got his first users. When Satoshi launched Bitcoin in 2008, he didn't buy a Super Bowl ad or Times Square billboard. He sent the white paper to cypherpunk mailing list and discussed it with a few thousand privacy and tech nerds. This was his go-to market, the way he got the first users and partners for his project. Very narrow, very targeted. Even on Hacker News, which is a nerdy place compared to Twitter, Bitcoin white paper got shared over half a year later, and probably it hasn't been even shared by Satoshi. This narrow way of promoting your project is an example of beachhead market, the concept inspired by World War II. And the story goes that like when Dwight Eisenhower wanted to liberate Europe in 1944, he needed a good place to land the Allied troops. But there was a problem. Germans already built the Atlantic Wall, a 2,600-kilometer chain of beach fortifications, minefields, machine gun nests, and steel obstacles that went from Norway down to southern France. If you look at the blog post version of this, you can see the map. thankfully, the Atlantic wall was uneven. Although it was heavily fortified in some places, it was weaker in Normandy, and this is why allies chose these beaches for D-Day. And Allied forces knew they cannot win the war in one strike. Their only way to win was securing a small strategic foothold to send more tanks, soldiers, and supplies to liberate France and the whole Europe. They had to win this small piece of land at all costs. So that's why if you watch Saving Private Ryan, like a lot of people died, but they still went on because this small beach was that important. And in startups, this Normandy-like strategy is called beachhead market. So you want to secure a foothold where it's going to be easiest to enter. For Satoshi, it was a cypherpunk mailing list. For Hayden, it was Ethereum OGs and devs at conferences, and then expand from there. So just like, allies didn't go directly for Berlin, and they actually never did go to Berlin. They left it to Soviets. You don't go directly for the whole market. You find one segment, dominate it, and then go further. So how do you choose the right segment? Finding your Normandy. There's this group chat where I hang out called Crypto Testers. And this chat is full of DeFi OGs. And because of that, we often trade notes on different crypto products. And whenever someone asks for a tool for farming APY, people brings up vols. And when you look at Telegram and see the same product being brought up in the context of APY, you get the feeling that, vols is the tool that all pros are using. Especially since you know that these people are not paid shills, they just like the product. They are hanging out there with their friends and recommending the stuff they are using themselves. So is the Crypto Testers group chat the right segment? Well, this group chat is pretty small. There's around 600 people hanging out there. But if Vaults decided to go after advanced DeFi users looking for maximizing risk-reward ratio on their yield, who hang out on Telegram and Discord group chats, that could easily be a few thousand users. Enough to move the needle, especially if they onboarded some whales that could provide a lot of volume for them. So what's the lesson here? Well, a good startup, a good segment for a startup is a group of people who have a painful problem that your product can solve. In this case, it's like how to find the best APY. Experience these problems in similar contexts. So here it's like, I'm an advanced DeFi user looking for an advanced product. Are reachable in a similar way. So they are hanging out on 10 specific group chats, following the same 20 people on Twitter, going to the same free conferences each year, and they talk to each other. They meet at events and group chats and trade notes, so you get some organic word of mouth. If they don't talk with each other, it's going to be way, way harder. Good segments are often geographical, like, let's dominate crypto meetups in Argentina. Vertical, let's target DAO treasury managers with at least $1 million of assets under management. Or focused on social clusters, like, let's get popular on these 5 DeFi group chats and conferences. And Zapper is a good example of the power of picking the right segments. Their biggest user growth during DeFi summer didn't come from integrating Compound or Aave. It came from integrating these small communities that had no good tools for tracking their DeFi rewards. So the Zapper team found these farms super early, integrated them very fast, and whenever these communities discover they can see all claimable rewards in one place, they became heavy Zapper users. So you can have many of these like smaller segments and just integrate them, and this could be your way to grow as well. One caveat here. Sometimes the segment that looks the easiest is not the best one for you. Our first segment for Kiwi was forecaster users who are looking for more long-form content. And this channel seemed to work for us because we got our first 1,000 users from there. But most of these people churned. And that's because our Ethereum first content wasn't the right fit for most of them. So you also need to think about this user product fit, like whether in this segment these people actually need this product. Because theoretically, you could ask all your friends and family to download your app and maybe you would have some users, but probably they are not the best fit for your product. So it's very important to keep that in mind. In other words, the fact that you know many crypto devs in Buenos Aires doesn't mean you should start from this segment. The right segment, just like the right place for troops on the French beach, should not only be relatively easy to enter, but it should also let you expand from there. Because order matters a lot. Starting from a high note. It is easier to start from a more aspirational market and then enter the wider market than the other way around. What I mean by aspirational market, I mean advanced users, exclusive access, or expensive product. Here are some examples. So Gnosis Multisig was initially a tool for ICO teams. When they expanded to normal users, it was easy to convince them that if Golem can hold 400,000 ETH on a Gnosis Multisig, it's probably good enough for your $5,000 portfolio. Forecaster, on the other hand, they started as a gated Silicon Valley and crypto builders community. So when they opened up for normal users, it was already a cool place to hang out. So the initial onboarding was easy. Pudgy Penguins, they started with an expensive NFT, and then they launched Lil Pudgies, Rods, and Pengu meme coin. So they were already this prestigious brand that people wanted to be a part of. So it was easy to onboard new people to join the Pengu community. Now imagine trying to do the other way around, starting with multisig for normies and trying to get 400,000 ETH from Golem to use your multisig, or starting from normies and then trying to onboard, these prestigious Silicon Valley and crypto builders, or starting from super cheap meme coin and then having expensive NFTs. That would be way, way harder. That's why you should typically start from the high note. Okay, so this is the end of fundamentals part. And now it's time to get to the most important go-to-market question, which is, where do you actually find these users? Step number 3, how do you reach these people? So let's say you want to learn programming. How do you do it? Do you learn like a little bit of C++, then a little bit of Java, and then a little bit of Python, assembly, and Rust? Probably not. In most cases, you either do a course focused on one particular language, or pick a project you're excited about and learn whatever language you need to ship it. And same with go-to-market. You don't enter the market by doing one tweet, one podcast episode, one YouTube video, one DM to potential partner, one TikTok video, and so on. Your efforts, just like with learning programming, need to be way, way more focused. You need to find one right channel to start with. So what are channels? Well, channels are basically paths that can lead customers to your product. There are many, many channels to choose from: conferences, BD, ads, billboards, SEO, and so on. A canonical list was described in the book called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. You can look it up. But what I wanted to do here, I wanted to collect examples of channels from the crypto market. So let's start. For Ethereum, the main channel was Bitcoin forums, group chats, and conferences. Vitalik was already well known in the Bitcoin community as a co-founder of Bitcoin Magazine, and he discussed Ethereum white paper with many people from the community. Later, he shared information about Ethereum on bitcointalk.org and revealed Ethereum at Bitcoin Miami. And even the ETH pre-sale was denominated in Bitcoin. So look how focused they were on that particular Bitcoiner segment. For Tether, the main channel was BT deals with centralized exchanges. In 2016-17, centralized exchanges had problems with access to banking systems. So they were happy to implement an alternative dollar settlement. And that's how Twitter has grown 1000x in 2 years. For Polymarket, the way to grow was a world-class Twitter game. Because Polymarket is about the current thing, Twitter is a perfect channel for them. So they already master Twitter. They post memes, they share news, they share screenshots of interesting bets, and they are great reply guys, to Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and like others. And they also have Shane, who's the founder and really knows how to tweet. For Snapshot, the way to grow is product-led growth. And during DeFi summer, almost everyone was a part of multiple DAOs. So when they saw that Snapshot worked well for Balancer, they're like, oh, that's cool. Could we use it for our DAO as well? So they implemented it for their DAO. And their other DAO members were like, oh, that's cool. Could we also implement it to other DAOs? So this is how they got a lot of viral growth. And, even Decrypt, when they had an article about Snapshot, they actually invited people to their Snapshot community so people could vote on different things. So, by the way, I'm referring these channels here, but if you go to this blog post version, there are many nice screenshots of the things that I'm talking about here. So, another example, Zerion. For Zerion wallet, the way to grow was NFTs. When they launched a wallet, they created this Zerion DNA avatar. And it was dynamic NFT that evolved based on what assets you held in your wallet. And it also, by the way, evolved based on which chains you held your assets. So the more money you held inside the wallet and the more chains you used, the more advanced this NFT became. So many people started sending money to their Zerion wallets, and for a long time, this Zerion DNA NFT was the second largest NFT collection on mainnet, just behind ENS, which was, of course, number one. For Lido, the channel was DeFi integrations. That's because, to make Lido work, they needed stake ETH to be convertible to vanilla ETH. So they spent millions of LDO tokens to incentivize liquidity for Curve STETH ETH pool. Later, they also added a strong integration with Aave because people who staked ETH were also looking for some extra yield. So that helped to further promote the project. For Echo, it was KOL, or basically KOLs. And this is a tricky one because they couldn't promote Echo because of the regulations. So people couldn't share information about the investments that they get invited to. So Kobe used his position and he built in public. He shared a lot of tweets about building Echo on his private profile, but also on this echo.xyz Twitter profile. And he also wrote this very, very long post about the early stage funding problem on his Substack, where he has, as far as I remember, like 70,000 subscribers. And I used plural for KOLs here because group curators, who are typically well-known crypto investors, they would send Echo invite codes to people that they wanted to invite to their investing groups. So that's how, for these KOLs, he onboarded new people to the app. For Uniswap, it was a very, very famous vampire attack. In 2020, Uniswap forked Uniswap and offered high sushi token rewards to users who stake Uniswap LP tokens. With APYs reaching 1,000%, many liquidity providers moved their funds, and in a few weeks, Uniswap got to around $800 million in TVL, which at the time was about 55% of all Uniswap's liquidity. And this vampire attack, just makes Sushi one of the top dexes and forced Uniswap to respond by launching the Uni token and doing one of the biggest airdrops ever. For Zora, the main channel was DMs. Back when Zora was very art-oriented, D Guns started DMing people on Twitter and Instagram. And he looked for people who were either artists, illustrators, or sneakers customizers. And he just called outreach saying, hey, you should mint NFTs because you do cool creative stuff. And there are people who are open to collect nice visual art. And despite a lot of inbound from big brands they got during the bull market, years later, Zora was still DMing potential users. For Safari, the main channel was building their own community. In 2022, Safari launched the community for crypto marketers. It worked in batches, so you had to apply. They reviewed your application, and if you get in, you learned crypto marketing together with about 60 to 100 people in a batch. It was really cool in a way that these people integrate instead of having 1,000 people at the same time. That would be very hard to build in relationships. So in 3 years, they received over 10,000 applications to Safari. And when they built their product for on-chain marketing analytics, they already had a lot of marketers they could easily reach because these people were part of their community. And they also asked community to mention this Safari Club member in their Twitter bios, which added extra distribution because every Twitter profile of a marketer that did that was a kind of like a billboard for Safari. For Aave, the way to grow was tapping into an existing community. So back in 2020, Aave made a bold move. They integrated Chainlink, which was on mainnet for about 7 months back then. So it was a pretty young product. They integrated Chainlink as their Oracle provider, and they let people use Link tokens as collateral. That move turned this very local Link Marines community into big Aave cheerleaders because they know that if Aave wins, then Link will also win. So they help to promote the product a lot. For Fluid Key, the channel to grow was Farcaster. So when they announced the product, they set up a frame where people could sign up for the waitlist. And they get about 6,000 signups. But they know that not all of these people are high quality users. Maybe someone signed up because they thought they might get some airdrop or whatever. So when the product was ready, Moritz, one of the co-founders, started manually onboarding users who had this FID below 20,000, which means they were among the first 20,000 Farcaster users, which meant that they are a pretty curated group of people. After they got a few hundred users from this batch, they built a bot that would DM about 100 users from the list every day and share an access code. And this is how they've grown. For Rainbow, the way to grow was a famous React library. And this channel is known as Engineering as Marketing. So Rainbow, they built a clean React Wallet Connect toolkit and just gave it away for free. And when devs implemented Rainbow Kit, by default, their dev shown Rainbow as one of the first class wallets. And devs could easily choose which wallets to display. They could even delete Rainbow altogether. But most didn't bother to change the defaults. So it helped build a strong Rainbow brand and onboard new users because whenever they connected the app, they saw the Rainbow logo. And, Rainbow Kit has been used by thousands of apps, and their GitHub repo has 2,700 stars. A channel to grow for POP was live onboarding. So POP launched at ETH Denver 2019, and Patricio would go person to person asking for people's addresses and mint the POPs manually for them, which was hard because, if you remember how bad mobile wallets were even in 2021, in 2019, they were very, very bad. But this channel still works for them. And since 2021, over 7,000 people got the I've met Patricio POP. And also, meeting Patricio became a kind of a meme in our industry. And of course, I know what you might think. You might think, well, yeah, these channels work, but all these products have more than one channel. And this is totally true. Lido, they have been very active on ETH Research, ETH Staker, ETH Finance. They went to many podcasts and so on. Fluid Key got support from their partners, namely ENS and Safe. Polymarket, close partnership with top media companies, and so on and so forth. But these are more mature companies. If you're a startup with limited resources, it's way better to focus on and master one channel. And once you master it, you're really great, it works. And you kind of see that it doesn't grow as fast as before, then it makes sense to expand further and look for other channels to grow. By the way, there are many screenshots from these channels in the blog post version. So if you want to look it up, just click the link. Okay, so how do you choose the channel? Because here, there's a list, you can do this, you can do that. But how do you actually choose which channel should you focus on? So a canonical way to pick a channel is going through the list of channels, coming up with ideas that might work for your startup, then scoring them by cost, ease of testing, time to signal, and fit with the product. Then you pick 3 channels to test, and then you choose which channel do you start with. I won't get into the details here. If you want a more elaborate description of the process, just ask your favorite LLM for Bullseye Framework by Gabriel One. Okay, so now let's get to testing the channels because, okay, you choose one to test. Okay, what do you do now? So here's bad news. Just like most product features won't improve your retention, most channel experiments won't drive more users. In other words, this growth is very probabilistic. It's not deterministic. It's just like betting. So you need to find the highest expected value bets you can take. So I'll give you some example. When I did grow for Kiwi, I decided that our best bets are newsletters, our Ethereum, and BD. And we thought that newsletters were a good bet because on Kiwi, there were many, many blog posts that were shared. So our logic was like, okay, if someone likes to read and they subscribe to newsletter, they might also like our app because they could discover more things to read. So we got mentioned in multiple newsletters. Among them was Toolfish, which was focused on Uniswap LP providers. And we thought that since they are advanced DeFi users, they might like our content too. With our Ethereum, the logic was that Redditors liked discussing Ethereum content. And since they cared about decentralization, they might find Kiwi, which was a decentralized Hacker News / Reddit-like app, interesting. So I shared weekly recap posts there and tried to invite these people to our newsletter. And if they got into newsletter, that would later educate them about the app. For BD, we organize writing contests with gnosis, nouns, and lens. And we ask Kiwi and our partners community to write blog posts that were focused on a subject proposed by our partner. They submitted their blog post to Kiwi, and our users voted on them and decided who wins a few $1,000 prize pool. It was a lot of work. But like co-marketing with these big partners elevated our brand a lot and let us reach new people who followed these bigger projects. And, like when we did one contest with Lance, thanks to this reach, we even got a prompt from Vitalik for one of our contests. So it was a really good way to get more reach. My personal approach to choosing bets is, I try to think about the highest expected value, but when I'm torn between channel A and channel B, I'm trying to look for ones where even if we don't reach the growth goal, that they would still leave us with better brand awareness, connections, or at least understanding of the user needs. So in our case, newsletters and our Ethereum experiments didn't deliver much growth. We reached some new people though, and it resulted in one podcast invitation and a few new users. But writing contests, they delivered a lot of growth. So after the first experiment, we doubled down on this channel and we organized 6 contests in 8 months. And this is what you should do. Like if one channel works, you double down, you focus on it and try to get as much growth from it as possible. And typically these kind of tests, they take about 2 to 4 weeks of honest effort. So in a year, you can test between 12 to 24 channels, which is a lot of new information to work with. I guarantee that if you test even 6 channels in a year, it's going to be so much information that you'd become way, way more knowledgeable about growing your product. And one pro tip I have here is that if you pick a channel, please speak with someone who already had some success there. So imagine you wanted to test Twitter, whether Twitter is a good channel to grow your product. but you've never tweeted before, so you create a account, you have 0 followers, and you make a few tweets. Like, how good would be your tweets? Probably not really good, because you never tweeted before, you didn't get the format, you don't have, the idea what works and what does not. So after such an experiment, you might think, oh, Twitter just doesn't work for our startup. But the problem might be your poor execution, not the poor, product channel fit. And the same applies to BD, podcasts, KOLs, TikTok, DMing people, and so on. There are many ways to do it badly. There are a few ways to do it well. So please, when you test a channel, do an honest effort and really try to do it well, to not confuse your poor execution with poor channel fit. Okay, so let's say you have chosen a channel, you made your tests. What's next? So now you get to examining the channels. So when you examine whether a channel works or not, there are small details that can make or break it. So when we tested if podcasts can work for Kiwi, it turned out that most of our appearances didn't move the needle. There was one ENS ecosystem call that ended with over 10 new paying users signing up right away. So when we dug in, it turned out that because Kiwi integrated ENS, the community wanted to test and support our product. And some of them have been using the product later. So there are many small details like that when you're like testing channels. So that's why it's a full-time job, because you really want to understand it very deeply. So once you have the results, a simple way to examine your channel is to answer 3 questions. Question number 1. How much does it cost to acquire one right user through this channel? And by cost, I don't only mean money, I also mean time, not only yours, but maybe other team members that you need to involve, energy, and other resources you might have. By right user, I mean someone who is not a bot, they are not farming an airdrop, and they are not, just looking around. In other words, the right user is someone who could potentially become a long-time product user, and they are the right fit for your product stage. And this product stage fit is important because you don't want a flood of normies when your product is still in alpha or like beta and still needs some crypto expertise to use it. So, you wouldn't buy a Forbes, ad when your product is like too advanced for average Forbes reader. Question number 2. How many users are reachable for this channel? So if you have 10,000 users and need to onboard at least 100 new users per week to meet your goals, then a group chat with 500 users might be too small for you because, after 5 weeks, imagine if you even onboarded all of these people, you'd just end this channel. So this is important to understand, but also if you're just starting and you have 0 users or 10 users or 50 users, then a group chat like that might be way more than enough. Also, if you're after this high potential users, so for example, let's say you're Aave and there's a group chat with 10 billionaires, of course, being active there and onboarding at least one of them would be very, very useful for the protocol. Okay, this was the second question. The third question is, if this channel works, does it scale without blowing up? So can you double down on this channel and go from 10 users per week to 1,000 users per week while still getting right users at roughly the same cost and effort? Or does it saturate and get worse fast? So that can help you determine whether this channel can become your main growth engine. Like for many companies, especially in Silicon Valley, these been like Facebook ads and Google ads. Like you can, if you spend more, you can reach even, tens of millions of users. So that's a very scalable channel. On the other hand, group chats, for example, or like communities could be, or even conferences could be way less scalable. And sometimes it is good to have this like small, spiky, quickly saturated channel because it can help you, reach some escape velocity and grow a little bit faster. One good example of that was, when Bored Ape Yacht Club started using Coloblend in 2021, the Coloblend team decided to strike the iron while it's hot. So Anjali, one of the co-founders, she just started DMing all NFT communities she could find on Twitter and saying like, oh, hey, would you like to get all people that collect your NFTs to join a group chat together on Discord or on Telegram? And after a few weeks, everyone was using Coloblend, so there was no point DMing users anymore. But this extra effort for a few weeks, it helped to speed up the adoption and secure the position that Coloblend had. So although this channel was spiky and they knew it could potentially become very quickly saturated, it was good to double down and, focus some effort on that. Okay, so let's say you pick the right market, pick the right segment, pick the channel, tested it, examined, and double down if it worked. What else do you need to do? Well, step 4 is how to make these people understand they need your product. So you need to pick the message. The message is basically what you tell or show to your users to convince them to try your product. Your message is, the taglines they see in the ads, the text that they see in your DMs, text they see on your landing pages, your blog posts, presentations, your BD calls, and all the visuals, of course, that go together. It could also even be your Dune dashboard that you use to promote your product. So what should you keep in mind? When someone hears about the new product, they silently ask themselves 3 questions. Question number 1, does this solve any immediate, urgent problem I have right now? Question number 2, does it meet the requirements I have for this type of products? And question number 3, how do I know I can trust that it's going to work as advertised? So if you don't help users find answers to these questions, you end up confused why people don't get it. I wrote a separate guide on messaging, so I won't dive deep into this subject. You can read the guide in the blog post, so it's linked there. What I will say though is that messaging is not just what you write on your landing page, and my guide is basically focused on that, but it's also what you say through your channels. So when L2Beat launched, they immediately got attention from different teams that were asking why our project hasn't been listed among L2s. And this spurred a lot of debate about what L2s actually are. If you remember, Polygon tried to convince everyone they're an L2, an L2Beat team pushed back a lot. And by having this discussion in public on Twitter, They educated the crypto community about the differences between sidechain and L2, and it also promoted L2 Beat and, let everyone understand how they can help us stay informed. Another example of messaging through channel is educating users about your product through podcast appearances like Eigenlayer did. Or you can be like Hayden, who personally explained, why Uniswap makes sense. So this messaging, you can do it through the channels that you are going to choose. It doesn't need to be your website, your landing page, or, your Twitter bio. But that being said, generally, it's safer to assume that your users know nothing when they land on your website and educate them from ground up. And that's because, if let's say some people learned about Eigenlayer through podcast, that's true, but some people just saw it on Twitter. And if they come from Twitter and they have zero context, they need to get educated from the ground up on Eigenlayer website. You cannot just expect them to listen to 40-minute long podcast episode to, get up to speed. And remember, Coinbase used to explain what is Bitcoin on their website in 2013. So the last step is dealing with the emotional part. So what I want to say honestly here is that this GTM is often emotionally hard. And it's hard because you need to make hard decisions, like which market we choose, which segment we choose, which channel we choose, which message we choose, and also get out there to face cold feedback, sometimes icy cold, from the real world. So here are a few things to bear in mind. When you pick your market, it will often feel too small, and it's probably fine. It's typically the signal just about right. It's better to choose a smaller market first. But remember that a good market should be growing. The faster, the better. Because when the pie is growing, it's way easier to get a slice from that pie. That's why VCs love this high compound annual growth rate markets in pitch decks. When you pick the segment, you will doubt if it's the right one, and it's totally normal. Remember that you are betting. Assume you might not get it perfect in the first try. So when you coin your segment as DeFi whales in Hong Kong who do 100,000 to 500,000 OTC trades, your instinct will tell you to broaden it, but resist that. Like a real beachhead always feels too narrow. That's what makes it conquerable. And if you start very narrow, the good thing is even if it's the wrong segment, you can easily move to another one with different messaging, different channel, different communications. If you start very broad, you can, as we sometimes say, burn the market. So people will think you're one thing, and then it's hard to change their perception of who you are. Sometimes it's just better to start from being totally unknown outside your segment. So you start from blank slate. When choosing channels, you might want to do many at the same time, and please don't do it. It takes some skill and time to verify if the channel is the right fit. So if you spend 5 times more time on doing one channel, obviously you will be better at this particular channel than if you divided this time on 5 channels. Also, remember that if you wrap up your tasks in 4 weeks, you will still have plenty of time to explore other channels. Remember, in 1 year, you can do even 12. Also, when you're doing messaging, you would feel that you are dumping down, and you are probably not. Really, ask your favorite LLM about curse of knowledge and dig in, because it's very easy to assume that other people know the same things as you, and most of the time they don't. So it's really important to make your messaging idiot-proof. And it's not because your users are idiots. They're probably not. But because they are busy. And when we are busy, we have less mental capacity to process information that comes to us. So, if your users are running to the meeting and they are in an elevator and they're just skimming through your message, they should be able to just get it right away. And you can always expand more in the docs or on your website. So you don't need to put all the information in the message that you're putting out there. And the last note is your go-to-market work might feel awkward, slow, or uncertain. And that's okay. That's okay because it should feel awkward because you're doing new things. It should be slow because you're learning new channels from ground up. And it should feel uncertain because you're making bets. So that typically means that you're on the right track. And good news is that despite all the problems with GTM is that you typically need one channel to click to take your startup to the next level. Okay, so what's next? Well, I know it's a lot to digest. So remember to bookmark this episode or bookmark the blog post and come back there from time to time if you need to refresh some ideas. And if you're building an Ethereum startup, I'd love to hear what you're working on. I run free office hours for founders, and I also work directly with teams on strategy and operations. So if you're interested, you can find more details and book office hours call with me and, have 20 minutes with me to just get my 2 cents on your startup. And if you want to better understand the mechanics of go-to-market, here are some materials for each stage. So for picking the market, there's a book called Where to Play by Mark Gruber and Sharon Tal. For finding the right segment, there's a book called Obviously Awesome by April Dunford. For testing the channels, I recommend Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. And for messaging, I recommend my own guide called How to Talk About Crypto Products Without Confusing the Users. So, yeah. And by the way, I'm working on a talk version of this post, and I already have one conference booked where I'm going to talk about go-to-market. So if you wanted to do, a GTM-focused Q&A for your community or invite me to talk at a conference or somewhere else, just hit me up and let's have a chat.